Hello, and welcome to today's presentation. Today we'll be going over GS1, how GLNs and EPCIS tie DSCSA together. Today's presentation agenda is who GS1 US is, what are global location numbers and why they are important to DSCSA, why is EPCIS, the Electronic Product Code Information Services, relevant to DSCSA data, how the pharma supply chain, which includes manufacturers, wholesalers, dispensers, 3PLs, and solution providers, need to take steps for DSCSA compliance. And finally, we will have time available at the end of the presentation to answer any questions we may not have covered. Please utilize the Q&A Zoom button at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions. My name is Pam Forster. I will be your moderator today. This presentation is being recorded and the video will be available and sent to you on follow-up email. From a housekeeping perspective, this presentation represents the speaker's understanding of the laws and standards. It is not intended as legal advice. Excuse me. For legal advice or guidance, please refer to the Drug Supply Chain Security Act on the FDA's website. Today's presenters are Tracy Nasarenko, Senior Director of Community Engagement at GS1 US. And along with Tracy is Inmar's Vice President for Product Strategy, Dwight deVera. And now here's Dwight to start us off.
Thanks, Pam. And I want to first and foremost thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Certainly, this is a topic that has gotten a lot of buzz, and I think it'll be a very popular topic and have a lot of buzz, at the very least, for the next 263 days. So 263 days from now, November 27th, 2023, we're going to have full implementation of the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, right? This the legislative ending of a 10-year journey, right? And just to set what we have as an industry been doing is we've been endeavoring to track and trace trillions of pharmaceutical serial numbers across billions of transactions amongst tens of thousands of trading partners and entities, and in the agency's words, in a timely manner, right? In an interoperable, timely manner, using an international standard. And today's topic is really to talk about that international standard. One of the things I want to set everyone's expectations about the next 260 days or so is this is not an ending deadline. It really is a starting line for DSCSA and serialization and transparency of the pharmaceutical supply chain in the US. Things will change closer to the end of this year. And this webinar, this content today, is truly a nuts and bolts conversation. It really is. And our goal is that if you spend a little time, just a couple of hours, thinking about how your organization fits in the context of this standard set by GS1, you can be set up for success with DSCSA. I don't want to really make any statements, and I don't want anyone to hope that there's going to be a delay, a pushback, enforcement discretion. All of the feedback we've gotten from the agency is that they believe there's new enforcement powers as a result of DSCSA going into effect. And you don't want to be on the other side of an FDA warning letter, a 483 action, where you're found in violation of the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. And those things, unfortunately, also come with press releases, right? So we want to follow the industry standard that we've all agreed upon as participants in this industry, and then make the transition to the next phase of DSCSA as seamless as possible. We're excited that Tracy from GS1 is joining us. So Tracy, do you want to have, tell us some initial thoughts about what you're seeing from your seat at GS1?
We're definitely seeing I would say, an uptick in questions and conversations about what kind of identifiers are required on EPCIS. It's great to see that we visibly can see that people are onboarding and exchanging data in preparation with their trading partners. We're getting more, I would say, detailed questions than maybe what we had 6 months ago. So you can really see that people are within the data, but definitely I would say the activity level has increased significantly. It's like someone flipped a switch when it was January 1st. I think everyone's looking at it and saying, okay, it's this year. It's, for so long it's been, 2023 in the future, but it's this year. So we're definitely seeing an increase in activity.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. So keeping in the theme, if you want to let us know what exactly is GS1 and the standards that GS1 sets.
Sure. So GS1 US is a not-for-profit kind of neutral standards organization. We're completely member-driven, which means that our board of directors and for each industry, like healthcare, we have a member-driven leadership group that kind of leads on what we're going to focus on, how we can help the industry, and kind of what we provide to industry is kind of the standards. It's really creating the common language, how to identify critical aspects, data elements. So, when we talk about identifying products, and we do it through the G10 and locations, GLNs, which I know we'll talk about, but really trying to have that common language. GS1 US is, focus on the US, but the standards are actually global. And so the thought is that common language isn't just for this country, it's on a global scale, and kind of depending on what your footprint as a business, you still have that common language. And we try to focus to identify those key aspects, kind of how to capture them, and then how to share them so that you can get that visibility throughout the supply chain, where your product is, where is it located, who owns it, just kind of being able to answer those kind of questions, and really have an understanding of through the product life cycle.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Sorry about that, Pam. Thanks, Tracy. Some additional commentary, everyone, about why we're using the GS1 standards. It is in the act. It's in the regulation, right? But the FDA, the agency, has this habit of telling us as industry participants what they want. But they refuse to actually really give us any hints as to how to exactly do it, right? So
yes.
The industry has certainly been coalescing, meeting with each other, staring at the same 1,000-page regulation, trying to figure it out, prototyping some things that worked and didn't work, right? Except when it does come down to it, as an industry, we've selected the GS1 standards, right? With EPCIS, we're going to get into that in a moment, and it wasn't some single organization that made this decision. It was the community of manufacturers, wholesalers, dispensers, trade associations, solutions providers. But what that means is things that you're used to in the past as relates to this regulation, EDI. There's going to be no more EDI, right? And we, to be very open with everyone, we hacked EDI to make it work. In the early days of DSCSA, like the advanced ship notification wasn't designed to do what we're doing with it. And it's impossible, it's technically impossible for us to use EDI going forward because of the level of detailed data and the serialized information in the drug supply chain. So, some of those questions that you may have, like, can I use my HIN number? Can I use my DEA number? Unfortunately, the answer is no, right? HIN, DEA, those constructs, they don't exist in the kind of GS1 standard. So we must use what we're talking about today: GTINs, GLNs, and EPCIS. Sorry to step on you, Pam. Do you want to have any other further thoughts about the GS1 standards?
Nope, not at all. Just wanted to reiterate that the industry has chosen this as the standard, and the FDA has also recommended it as the adoption of what we'll be moving forward with. So thank you for that. So there's a lot of industry buzz about GLNs, global location numbers. A lot of questions. Do I need one? Do a group that I participate in, maybe a GPO or my wholesaler? Who do I need to share this information with? So Tracy, can you help us understand what a GLN number is and why it's so important for the industry?
Sure. So GLN is a 13-digit number that essentially identifies the who and the where. So where that becomes really important, not just that it's location, which I think, naturally from the name people get to, but it's also the who. And so in DSCSA, you will not see any standards in the law. It doesn't speak to that level of standard, but what it will speak to is it's a change of ownership law. So in the transactions that really speaks of the ship from, ship to, but more importantly, sold from, sold to, and whatever is identifying that is going to become quite critical, because that's the focal point of the law, that it's that change of ownership. So the GLN in EPCIS is that identifier. And so therefore it's not just where the product is located, but essentially the party that owns it in that change of ownership law. So I definitely, we have gotten an increase in questions about GLN and so forth, because it's one of those that you may use EPCIS, you may not use EPCIS, kind of depending on where you are in the supply chain and what you're going to, if you need to use EPCIS. But because it's a data exchange and interoperable, requirement, it really becomes the fact that you're dependent if your trading partners use EPCIS, because they're going to need GLN transaction. And so that's where you really hear a lot of, kind of inquiry of what are your GLNs? Do you have are you enumerated? And there are multiple ways, and I know we'll talk about it in the next slide, of ways to be enumerated. But fundamentally, it's 13 digits. The first part is your prefix, if you assign for your prefix, and then kind of that location reference. And then the last digit is that check digit. And we can kind of talk about in the different ways that you can enumerate kind of what that structure, but it's always that 13-digit number.
Yeah, to add on to what Tracy just mentioned, I wanted to kind of comment in context of what's been going on so far. Now, the team at GS1 has been very gracious and helped out large, essentially trade organizations like the group purchasing organizations and the wholesalers with really a managed GLN program, meaning that those other entities, not GS1, the GPOs on behalf of their members, and then wholesalers primarily on behalf of independent pharmacies, have programs where they will, along with GS1, enumerate the facilities to get the bare minimum shipped to GLN, which is really exactly what we need as a minimum to make interoperability work. Now, how can you tell if the GLN was assigned by like a GPO? It primarily begins with like a number like 110,000. There isn't a kind of company prefix. It's representing GPOs in general. Or if it's 120,000, generally you'll see that it's a GLN represented and developed by a wholesaler program. But later on in today's presentation, we're going to get into why this may not necessarily be adequate for your organization, right? So, really this is a bare minimum program. If you have a simple type of supply chain setup, this will probably work, but there are plenty of scenarios where you may need to take control of this process yourself. And we're going to get into later in today's presentation what you need to do and some of the homework you need to do to kind of get ready. One statement I do want to make here is, so GLNs have nothing to do with billing and invoicing. I know there's a lot of conflagration about, some of the things that we've done in the past about, well, yeah, we're sending invoices to each other, and that's really kind of these tracing documents, or even the agency didn't help saying, oh yeah, you could have a paper packing slip, and that could possibly be adequate from a documentation perspective, right? But going forward, 263 days from now, no more paper, right? It has to be electronic, right? And lots of those constructs, invoicing, ship notifications, things like that. Those are the things that we had to do to get the industry to where it is today. And the future is really this EPCIS standard and GLNs, which we're going to get deeper into. So Pam, do you have any other kind of final thoughts on this slide before we get into the details?
No, I don't. I think the burning question is, Tracy, why are GLNs necessary?
So there's two systems that use GLNs and require GLNs. So you have the EPCIS, and I know we're going to talk about EPCIS a little bit more, but essentially EPCIS is it kind of captures the events that will occur through that product's life. So and so that each time that there's that from to who it's there's a change to, it's using the GLN to be that identifier. So if you are, or your trading partner is using EPCIS, it's going to require a GLN. The other bucket, I would say, and not everyone's using this, but some are, is a verification router service. So the concept is that you are going to maybe want to verify a product. And what certain organizations have done is kind of automate that, and they're using it's called a VRS solution, and they're going to go and automatically say, "Hey, is this product okay? I've scanned this. Is this product okay?" And the manufacturer can come back and say yes, and you can kind of have that response and back and forth. So in both of these systems, the GLNs are required. And then just like was stated before, the EPCIS has kind of been recommended by FDA, saying it enables getting that TI, that transaction information, and that transaction statement requirements for DSCSA in kind of that interoperable manner.
Yeah, I want to add some extra thoughts about the VRS, or the verification routing service. Some of the folks in the audience may not be familiar with it, right? And to a degree, you may not necessarily need to be aware of it. The VRS is an innovation that the industry invented over the last couple of years. It was primarily designed to deal with resaleable returns, right? So, you have a misshipment or an overage, a product that you didn't really order or didn't really need, you returned it primarily to the manufacturer, to a wholesaler. You return it primarily to a wholesaler. According to the Act, that wholesaler needs to verify all of the attributes of that product at a packaging level. So the serial number, the SG-TIN, the expiration, and the lot number. And the VRS was really a system that was developed alongside GS1 to facilitate that verification, right? So it's still in place today, right? And just to give everyone some context, 2% of all drug products in the United States are returned. It's about 60 million transactions. That is kind of the industry number. So it's not a small number of products, and we would hate for that to go to waste if it couldn't be verified. So that was an innovation in the VRS that came into being. Pam, do you have any comments about what the dispenser community needs to do as it relates to the VRS?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misinformation out there about the VRS, as you said. So it's primarily designed for wholesalers for that resaleable return, as well as checking it if there's a potentially counterfeit product that you want to start an investigation. What some people may not be aware of is once you enter information into the VRS, it actually starts that investigation process. So last month, a bunch of industry representatives got together in DC to talk about exceptions. And the one thing, and Tracy and I were both there, so she can certainly chime in, but the one thing that we started to twist what the recommendation is if you have a product that you need to check to see if it's suspect, you need to notify who you got it from. So that's starting an inquiry, not an investigation. So initially you want to start an inquiry into that product to make sure it's a legitimate product. And should you find out that it's not, then you want to start the investigation. So that did come out last month when we were all at the PDG conference down in Washington, D.C. So Tracy, how's the industry planning on working with the GLNs and kind of tying everything in together?
So what we see is with the GLNs is that there's different ways that you can get GLNs, and I think we'll cover that in a little bit. But what we really see is that from an industry point of view, really more discussion on, do you already have a GLN? Do you need to get GLNs? Do you understand why you need to get a GLN? We're seeing a lot of onboarding of trading partners with each other, which is bringing up the conversation. And I think it's the conversation that kind of is necessary. I think one of the things that I would say one of the biggest takeaways for DSCSA is that it's not only the interoperable exchange of data, but it really pushes trading partners to really communicate with each other. And I think that came out in the exception workshop as well, is that, what might have worked within your four walls may not work when you're trying to have that interoperable exchange. And then therefore, it really becomes quite, I would say quite critical that you need to talk with your trading partners. And so we're starting to see a lot of questions and understanding of GLNs, do you have one, and how you can enumerate and so forth. And I think part, and just kind of what this slide is showing is that just kind of talking about that interoperable and having that end-to-end traceability, kind of EPCIS captures all those events. And so we kind of say events versus transactions, because the thought is that it's not just a point in time, it's kind of what's happening to the product as it goes through the supply chain. So commissioning means that you produce the product, it can get packed and shipped. This is an example under a manufacturer, and then you kind of move to the wholesaler, and you see that GLN, it's having that GLN kind of mark throughout all those events, but it's really critical when it goes to ship to receive, because now you have a change of ownership as an example. And that becomes quite critical under the change of ownership law of DSCSA. And same thing, wholesaler and dispenser. Now, obviously, there's many other scenarios of where a product could go, and this is a bit simplified. But really, under DSCSA, it kind of ends at that receive at dispenser. It doesn't mean that you don't need that traceability. It just means that the change of ownership has ended, unless that dispenser decides to go and sell that product as if they're a wholesaler. But essentially, once they receive it, that's going to be the end of the change of ownership under DSCSA. EPCIS allows you to kind of transact everything that could happen to the product, whether it's, decommission, if it's going to be destroyed, and there's things that are under DSCSA. But if you did want to use EPCIS, you could use it to the end of the life of that product. And what we see is that people are going to share the events that are critical for DSCSA or required for DSCSA, and they will have additional events that are captured. They'll just keep them within the repository, because they're not required to exchange them.
Thanks, Tracy. One of the things about this slide in particular, right? So many times in the industry we talk about the happy path, right? So the 95% of things that happen in your worlds should follow this path. The manufacturer makes a product, wholesaler distributes the product, and it goes to the dispensers, right? And then but now when we start adding the reality of the real world, we're talking about in the US, hundreds of manufacturers, hundreds of wholesalers, tens of thousands of dispensers, right? That's kind of how many GLNs the industry is going to really need. Now, I do want to talk about the differences. What Tracy mentioned is there certainly is a data supply chain as well as the physical goods supply chain. Now, we operate today in the physical goods supply chain. That's not what we're discussing here. What we're talking about is the changes to the data supply chain in the context of the GS1 EPCIS standard and framework But I wanted to mention, the best description I have of it is logistical edge cases. Doesn't apply to everyone on today's webinar, but it certainly needs to be mentioned, right? And how are we going to deal with drop shipments, right? So a drop shipment in many of your worlds is a process in which a manufacturer will ship directly to a dispenser, billed through a wholesaler, right? That's the commercial definition of a drop shipment. Now, in the context of what's going to happen here in the data supply chain is the manufacturer may not be aware of the end dispenser. They may not have that GLN reference, but they will pass through that shipment information to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler will redirect it to essentially the dispenser. Because in this exact edge case, right, the wholesaler never sees the product, right? So it's kind of one of these exception cases that we need to be aware of. And if you're shipping direct, if the manufacturer just buying and selling, shipping direct to the dispenser, you do need both of those GLN endpoints. And it doesn't hurt if you pass along the GLN endpoints, even in the dropship scenario. That's really one of, as Inmar, our first recommendations is share it on the GS1 Data Hub, share it with your trading partners, because it's always better to have more information. The second edge case that I do want to get into, and it's a little bit more involved, is 340B, right? This is a little bit of a very hot topic of like, how will this work, right? So now this is in the context, and so for some of you people on today's webinar, this doesn't mean anything, but if you are a contract pharmacy or a covered entity in the context of 340B, right? Again, our recommendation is be aware of everyone's GLNs in the data supply chain that I just mentioned, right? So, you know, the manufacturer is actually fulfilling through the wholesaler this 340B special pricing drug program. In particular, the agency has not actually given us any guidance as to, well, what do you do about DSCSA? And to basically have the most level of information, the highest level of information possible between everyone is, we are saying that it should be a shared responsibility, that as a covered entity, you should know all the GLNs of your contract pharmacies, and actually even recommend if they don't have GLNs for them to get GLNs, right? You should, as a covered entity, communicate all of that to the wholesaler that's actually administering really your 340B program. The product is actually coming to the individual contract pharmacy. They're the ones that are going to be responsible for reconciliation under DSCSA. So unless they have the data, right, they will need, they won't have anything to refer inside of the data stream. So, you know, our recommendation in this edge case, 340B, is that covered entities and contract pharmacies all register with GS1 and have GLNs. And when we get to that slide in today's presentation, this may be one of those reasons why you should manage your GLN programs yourselves, right? So if you're participating in 340B, it's a little more complex than being a straightforward ship-to type of logistical arrangement or business arrangement. So you may want to manage the process yourself. Pam, do you have any final thoughts on this slide?
Nope, you took my thunder, and I was going to ask you to take us on the journey of how to obtain a GLN and the proper format and all that. So you did your own intro there, Dwight.
Okay, yeah, all right. So the next slide is mine, right? So where do you fit in the context of you know, basically being able to utilize a managed GLN program either through the GPO or through the wholesaler, right? And where do you want to, or what we recommend is roll your own and manage your GLN process with the GS1 team. Now, you can do this with only a couple of hours of homework, right? You really just need to know your, you know, physical addresses of your organization. You need to spend a couple of $100s with GS1 and actually self-enroll within GS1's portal, and we're gonna talk about that. But our recommendation is, if you have what I'll call a smaller operation, you could be a large health system and have less than 10 facilities. But if it's pretty straightforward, you're getting RX products from wholesaler or manufacturers to individual facilities, you're part of a GPO, the GPO has actually enumerated your facilities, you should be fine. Or single facilities, that managed GLN program should be fine for you. There also are some small entities that aren't actually in a managed program, right? So if you're, part of a state health system, penitentiary, other types of systems, there's no one trying to manage your GLNs for you. So unfortunately, you have to manage them yourselves under DSCSA. But if you're a larger facility, or what I'll just call larger operations meaning you have not straightforward supply chains. Maybe you have your own break bulk, make bulk distribution center. Maybe you actually are affiliated with several acquisitions or several other health systems. Maybe you're a retail pharmacy chain, right? Because the managed GLN program from the wholesalers is really targeted at independents. So if you're a pharmacy chain, you need to manage your own GLNs. You need to essentially do the homework, really identify all of your locations, identify all your planned locations, and start this process, and just spend a couple of hours and a couple of $100s to register with GS1, and then really kind of set up your GLNs, and even go through what I'll call a robust setup, like set up your bill tos, ship froms, sold tos, all of the GLN programs. And then it goes without saying, if you're a manufacturer or a wholesaler, you registered early, right? So if you're actually operating in the US and you're commissioning and distributing your products, you're a GCP manufacturer, you are in all likelihood already registered with GS1, and you just need to be aware of the data that you're about to see with all the other trading partners, whether they're dispensers or wholesalers. And then everyone just needs to keep each other honest in this process, because it is a little bit of a journey. And then, Tracy, I know I've commented a lot about your program, your managed GLN program. Do you have any other comments about it that I haven't mentioned?
Just it's the GPO that's predominantly for hospital providers. And then you made the same statement I would, is that the wholesale distributor program, there are 4 that are participants in it, and it really actually, in the legal language, it's very specific. It's those small independent pharmacies. So they do have some restriction within the legal agreement that they can't enumerate every single customer. It's only customers for DSCSA that meet that kind of size. And just so that people are aware, if they're saying, no, I can't enumerate on your behalf, it might be because of the requirements within the agreement. But we see, manufacturer wholesalers usually have a GCP to create G10, so therefore you can use the exact same GCP to make GLNs. You don't need a separate, GCP for GLNs. It's the exact same one. And then large facilities, there's more of a decision making, I would say. You might fall under a managed GLN program. It might make sense for you to license a single GLN. Just so everyone knows, a single GLN is $30. It's a one-time $30 fee. So, it's not exorbitant. But again, as you get to so many locations that you need to enumerate, then it might make sense to go the prefix way. Just for economical sense. But small facilities, and I would say on the cusp of large, of how many locations, that there's options just to get one GLN if that's all that you need.
Awesome. Well, Tracy, do you want to take us through the GS1 Data Hub and kind of how people can navigate through it, and what the different aspects of that are?
Sure. So there's actually 3 data hubs. There's data hub, product, location, and company. So kind of related to GLN, we're really focusing on the data hub location. And very much what I say about with GLNs being visible and able to share in location, it's the same thought process with product for G10s, and with prefixes with company. But what we're really seeing from the industry point of view is that in kind of getting ready for DSCSA, everyone said, okay, I need to know my trading partners' GLNs. And so that's where there's really been kind of that push to have your information, your GLNs into Data Hub location, because it essentially enables you to be able to share with everyone. And then instead of having to send lists to every single trading partner that works with you, and to kind of avoid duplication. So example would be if a wholesaler enumerated a pharmacy through the managed GLN program, and now you're a manufacturer and you also do drop shipments to that same pharmacy, you don't need to create another GLN for that exact same pharmacy. You could use the GLN that's already been created. And so, but how would you know? I mean, how would you know that location's already been enumerated? And that's kind of where the Data Hub location came from, because then you would have that ability to see what has been enumerated and be able to get those GLNs. So there's different ways. If you get a GCP or a single GLN, you automatically get a subscription for create manage within Data Hub. But if you only need to kind of view others, there's a subscription that's just for view use. The thought is that we never want people to have to kind of pay more than the services they need. So we kind of broke it up so that you're only paying what you need. Again, we're not for profit, so we just have to keep the lights on and cover the, of course, the technical support help. But we're really seeing that there's a big push for Data Hub location just to kind of help with that ease of being able to visibly see the enumeration that's already occurred within the supply chain.
And I think, Tracy, the key that people probably need to remember is make sure you make that data shareable. So that way your partners can see that information and not having to bug you and all that stuff. So awesome. Yeah. Great. So now what we're going to do is move on to our next topic. And I know we're more than halfway through, so hang in there with us, people. So next we're going to talk about EPCIS, or the Electronic Product Code Information Services. So Tracy, can you start us off on exactly what is EPCIS and how it's related to the data for DSCSA?
Sure. So essentially, I mean, you said the Electronic Product Code Information Services. Within this rolls right off in a ton. So EPCIS is essentially it's global. And when the industry was looking for a way to be able to meet the DSCSA requirements and kind of capture that information, there really wasn't support of having one large database. People pretty much wanted to own still their data and share what was required under DSCSA, so that you still have that visibility of kind of the life cycle of the product, but still have kind of that ownership of the data. So that's where EPCIS kind of fit that requirement. It allows you to get that event data. It allows you to capture all those events through the life of that product, but you only have to share what's relevant to DSCSA with your trading partners. So that was kind of the thought behind EPCIS.
In particular, and Tracy, I'm really glad you mentioned, some of the ideas, right? So many of us have been working on this for years, right? There was that idea of, well, what if we had, some ultimate database, right? A central database, and just the reality is, healthcare in the United States it's a competitive market, right? So creating a single data store of all of the transactions in the US, there probably isn't a platform that would actually hold those trillions of serial numbers, billions of transactions. And it was kind of a non-starter for all of us as an industry. How do we do this with keeping the data private, right? How do we do this where we have commercial agreements, we know each other, but still remain within the confines and the spirit of kind of this regulation? And it really does come down to, EPCIS and really kind of knowing each other, in the supply chain. But, let's go to the next slide, and then, we can just point out, or I can just quickly point out, what EPCIS's benefits are, right? So, like Tracy mentioned, it's global, right? So it's flexible and extensible. And in particular, we as industry participants have been working side by side with GS1 to shape this standard. It isn't something that, GS1 just made up and then it's just like, use this. No, we have shaped what EPCIS is, what EPCIS does. GS1 has been very flexible, even with things like I mentioned earlier, like the creation of the verification routing service, right? The data is only shared with your chosen parties, right? Now, we recommend making your GLNs, it's kind of like an address book, public, but you're only passing data to your chosen parties or your trading partners, right? It does require GLNs. That's really why one of the big reasons we're having today's event, but it's not a single database. And the standard we're using right now in the United States is 1.2. It's XML for you technical people, right? There's a 2.0 JSON version, it's years away. We're going to use 1.2, right? We'll move to 1.3 because there's some additional functionality that we're going to get for non-DSCSA related stuff, but you'll see that in the next couple of years. And it does support all of our requirements. The G10, which is also a surrogate for the National Drug Code, the serial numbers, lot numbers, expiration, and it allows us interoperably to query and verify a product. Do you have any other attribute comments, Tracy, about EPCIS before we move on?
No, I mean, I think the big thing, just so that people know, is that it really was chosen by the industry. I know in local we'll have things that are more focused, like DSCSA exists in the US, but doesn't exist globally, although there's similar regulations and so forth. But global, just like in the US, is member driven. So there are global standards work groups that are industry members that are really giving that input on what the standard is. So everything that we do is really the industry has chosen, and we kind of just work to meet the needs of the industry.
So just a couple of things for clarification. So for DSCSA for November of 2023, it must be an electronic interoperable system. No more paper packing slips, pedigrees, anything like that. I see some questions coming in asking that over again. So the industry as a whole is going electronic. We're not killing any more trees by the paper stuff. It all has to be done through this EPCIS data, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We want everyone unplug the fax machine.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So Dwight, if you can kind of take us through. So we talked about how the data is going to be handled electronically through your trading partners to connect the dots from commissioning all the way through decommissioning. So now let's talk about when the product arrives at a dispenser, or it even could arrive at a wholesaler where you see the pallets or whatnot. Can you talk about how these are going to be handled?
Yeah, so one of the big issues, is kind of like a big issue written into the regulation. Like everybody, 263 days from now, has to verify the product at a package level, right? And that really means comparing the serial number, lot number, expiration, and G10 for every product that comes into your facility, right? Now, there isn't anybody on this call that isn't experiencing some kind of workforce shortage in healthcare, right? Whether you're a manufacturer or a wholesaler, and the dispensing community, right? We can't, as a result of this regulation, break healthcare in the US, right? It's just not a great idea. And we have been working closely with GS1 and the agency to get acceptance of what's called aggregation and inference. We don't have to get into the details, but what this allows us to do is have a barcode which represents the products within a container, whether it's homogeneous or heterogeneous. So for manufacturers, like if it's a homogeneous case of 24 bottles, right? The wholesalers and manufacturers, the wholesalers will just be able to scan the barcode for the case and interpret or inherit and understand every product, every serial number that's within that case. And for dispensers who receive, things like what you see here on the screen, a tote, right? There is a linear barcode usually on that tote, right? That will aggregate and infer the data for the heterogeneous products within that tote. So the big breakthrough, and then we've we've actually notified as an industry and told the agency, like, we're going to use aggregation and inference. They've mentioned it in their guidance, and we're going to use it for homogeneous and heterogeneous containers, meaning when that tote comes in, if that wholesaler or manufacturer supports aggregation or inference, all you'll need to do when you receive is to scan the tote, and ideally 99% of the products will be exactly what you ordered and what's inside of that tote. Now, it's very important that, especially in the dispensing community, and actually in all trading partners, that you have standard operating procedures that document this process, right? So from a licensing accreditation perspective, this is something, additional homework everyone has to do. We have to write or have SOPs for DSCSA, and then in those SOPs, ideally say, if the manufacturer or wholesaler supports aggregation, we're just going to scan the individual outer container or license plate and trust the data that's in the file. Pam, do you have any comments about SOPs or what the dispensers need to do?
No, I think you pretty much touched on it, Dwight. And coming up next for our DSCSA stakeholder action, we're going to go through, first Tracy is going to go over what manufacturers need to do if they're not already doing it. And then real quickly, we'll go over the dispensers as well. So Tracy, if you want to come at it from a manufacturer point of view.
Sure. So I'm not going to go in great detail. I know we're running a little out of time and want to make sure we have time for Q&A, but just kind of, we put up like the top 10 kind of to-dos that, that a manufacturer or repackager would need to do. Product marking, like we talked about, you need to be able to capture the product from the barcode. So you need to make sure that you have those 4 product identifiers, the NDC embedded in the G10, expiry, the lot number and the serial number. And then kind of move from that, you have to have G10 assignment. So again, kind of supporting that product marking. GLN, we talked about quite a bit as well. Just like dispensers, manufacturers need to have that GLN set up and assignment as well. But then kind of getting into really the crux of how are you going to capture the information as you're processing that product, packing and shipping as an example. How are you going to capture that TITS using EPCIS? How are you going to do kind of your master data setup and that data exchange and the onboarding and so forth? And then really, what are those processes that are necessary to kind of support all of that? Your operational process, your maintenance process, as you get new products, as you get new locations, how are you keeping that information up to date? Product verification we talked about, and making sure you have a process and prepared for that, and then processes to kind of support that. So you can kind of see like that top 10 of things that manufacturers need to do. And this really kind of getting to the next slide is you will need this. If they don't do it on the front end, then that's going to impact you on the back end. So just as the manufacturer needed to do, so does the dispenser and needing that GLN, because you need to have that endpoint of that transaction, identified. How are you going to capture the product identification information when you receive it? Again, just like manufacturers and wholesalers need to onboard for going downstream, you need to be a part of that process. And how are you going to do that data exchange? Are you going to use a portal? Are you going to have your own repository system? Are you going to outsource it? How are you going to, be able to have that information for 6 years as required by the law? And then, of course, the same things, operational processes to support the system, maintenance, again, new products, new locations, any changes that happen, how are you going to manage that product verification? And then the process to kind of support it. So I know that was a bit quick, but kind of you can kind of see from a dispenser point of view, there's kind of like the highlight of the top 7 things that we could really see that were necessary to get ready for DSCSA.
Yeah, and we'll make sure the slides are sent out too on follow-up. That way people get a chance to see them. So thank you, Tracy. So Dwight, for this next slide, we threw this in just from the perspective that Inmar has because of being the largest reverse distributor. Do you want to kind of go over what that decommissioning event will look like?
Yeah, in particular, and again, like we're certainly have other sessions about decommissioning, but Inmar as kind of many of the audience's decommissioning and 3PL reverse distributor is we are going to decommission serial numbers when that product actually is sent off for destruction, right? So we're participating in this EPCIS exchange, and then you certainly should be working with our data teams right now to set up your EPCIS interoperable connections to Inmar so you can get your decommissioned data. Let's go to the next slide and we can get to questions because I want to make sure we have time for questions, and I'll just breeze through this. We are going to I'm going to be releasing a video of all things related to exemptions for DSCSA related to the expiration of the public health emergency. I'm not going to get into the details. It's going to be a 3-minute video. So stay tuned for that. And, I can say like and subscribe if you like that video. But let's get to kind of the Q&A of this topic because I've seen all those things rolling in, and we're going to be limited on time.
Yeah, so real quick, we do have a demo of the Inmar solution. If you're interested, you're a dispenser. For RX Transparent, we work with the dispenser community. You can sign up for it. It's March 22nd. But we do see the questions rolling in, so we can move on to the next slide, Marina, please. Thank you. So we see a bunch of questions coming in. So one thing, and Tracy, for clarification, the GLN is about the physical location of the facility that's receiving product, correct? Because some of the questions we're getting in is asking if it's related to NDCs, or if I have a prefix for a hospital or health system, do I need to have other GLNs for other locations? So can you just clarify for that for us once again?
Sure. So the GLN can represent legal entity, physical location, a function. So it really depends on how you want to use it. It has nothing to do with the NDC, but it's pretty much what you want. Some locations or some organizations, I should say, a legal entity and a physical location could all just be one, that you wouldn't need multiple. And others that kind of create a whole hierarchy. So you could have your legal entity, and then you could have multiple locations, and some people even go down to functions. Some people go down to more granular level of locations. In a hospital, there could be an OR, there could be a receiving dock, there could be billing, there could be, there could be multiple aspects that they're enumerating. So it really depends on what works best for your organization. But it's not related to the NDC.
Okay, perfect. And then so there's a question about the SGLN, and that's the shipping GLN, correct?
So the SGLN, and so I'm going to apologize on behalf of GS1 US. We have the SG10, which is the sterilized G10, and that makes perfect sense what the S stands for. And then we create this SGLN, and the S really stands for nothing. So I'll apologize. Essentially, it's syntax. It's the syntax version. So in EPCIS, just from a little bit of a technical point of view, in EPCIS, it's actually, there's a certain syntax version of how you're going to have your GLN, and that's what the SGLN is. Usually, you use your GCP, length to kind of be able to create that specific syntax, but yeah, unfortunately, the S really stands for nothing. Gotcha.
Okay. Let's see. Just trying to see if I can group questions together so we can answer a bunch of them. So there is a question if there's GS1 coordinators for specific organizations.
I'm sorry, say it again.
The question is, how do we find our GS1 coordinator for our organization?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is actually a DSCSA, like a GS1 DSCSA mailbox that anyone can go to. We have member support continually, and they'll always field questions. And then myself, you can always come to me. We'll answer any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll phone a friend within GS1 US and we definitely can, help.
And we can make sure we put Tracy's contact as well as that DSCSA email in the follow-up as well. And I think, Tracy, you also have like a 1 or 2 page on how to obtain your GLN. So maybe we can put that on follow-up too. Marina and Alex, who are our marketing gurus on this, are probably cringing right now as I'm saying that, but we can make sure we can get the information out to everybody. All right, so let's see. We had a question come up internally on where the digital requirement begins. Our pharmacy enters orders on various systems. I would argue that the origin of the order and the digital requirement begins there, not the forecast demand. Perspective on that. That might be a great question.
Yeah. I mean, certainly that's that's kind of an internal processing, type of question. So in particular, and I did quickly mention it, right? So what we're talking about here, DSCSA serialization, it has nothing to do with really kind of order management, commercial agreements, payments, invoices, credits, right? It has everything to do with the physical transshipment of goods between trading partners and then the requirements that need to follow along. So you place the order with your wholesaler, the wholesaler fulfills it. They're going to take data from the manufacturer for that product and actually ship that along in EPCIS format to kind of you or your solutions provider. And that is really what we're talking about here. It's not really about the digital requirements. What we're saying, one thing that we are saying loud and clear is it can't be on paper anymore. There's no more handwritten notes. There's no more, paper pedigrees, scanning, faxes. That's over.
All right. Do we need to share our GLN with our trading partners, or will this be done automatically? Does the GS1 Hub allow us to view trading partners' GLN numbers? Is this correct? So I know I can answer quickly the first part. If you're an Inmar customer with RX Transparent, when we set up the connections with your trading partners to get your EPCIS data, we will provide them a list of who our customers are that use them with the account number that equates to the GLN. So we'll handle that for the Inmar customers. But Tracy, do you want to talk about how in general people can share that information?
So when you have your GLN within Data Hub, you can actually choose to share it. You can choose to share it only to one trading partner, a list of trading partners, all of the industry, or everyone. What we've heard is the industry is really saying, please select all, because it makes it much easier. And essentially that is physical. If someone has a view use subscription, they would be able to then get that GLN. And the thought is then you can avoid duplication of effort and the fact that if it's already enumerated, you can just use that GLN and you don't have to enumerate it again.
Awesome. So a person put in, they've inquired in the past about their GLN and was told that the GPO should have the information regarding the GLN. The GPO then informed them that they needed to acquire their own. It's for an independent pharmacy. Is there any way that they can check, maybe contact you, Tracy, or that generic email to see if they have one yet? And at least you guys can let them know if they do or don't.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, we could easily look it up and see if there is one.
Awesome. All right. Sorry, we have like over 67 questions. So if we don't answer your question live, we'll do it in a follow-up, and that will be included as well as frequently asked questions. Let's see here. So some questions about, does this apply for freestanding surgical centers or independent pharmacy, retail pharmacy? DSCSA is for anybody that dispenses medication, has to adhere to the regulation. Dwight, Tracy, anything to add on that one?
Nope, we're good. Let's take the next question.
All right. Let's see. Somebody, since you mentioned the future standard for JSON, they're asking if that's going to be a new required program, or would we expect backwards compatibility with that? I don't know if you know the answer yet on that or not. So
actually stay tuned, right? There are advantages, technical advantages to go into the JSON. It's a more modern framework, but that is not what we're doing in 263 days, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's XML version 1.2.
So Tracy, just to reiterate again, because I see a bunch of questions, can a HIN be used in place of a GLN? Or another question is, we have the DEA, why do we need a GLN? So if you want to reiterate again, why the GLN?
So, well, just a couple things. So DEA doesn't really want you to use the DEA number as an identifier, you know, besides its original purpose. And so I know that like we're not even allowed to have DEA as a searchable field within Data Hub, because you're really vetted to be able to have access to the DEA number. So that's been more, you know, I would say direct, you know, feedback. DUNS we've heard, HIN, NPI, and just so everyone knows, the GLN within EPCIS is a 13-digit, so sometimes the number of digits don't match up, and it's all numeric. It's not alphanumeric. And so really the thought is that if everyone's using a GLN, that is a global standard, and that makes it standardized throughout the industry versus you can have collision if you're, you know, trying to create one identifier and make it into another identifier. There's no way to avoid that collision. And that's kind of the thought is that it's a unique number that would only be the only one representing that location.
Gotcha. All right. Now we're close to the time. So again, any questions that we have not been able to answer, we will definitely get them answered and get those out to you. So I just want, on behalf of Tracy, Dwight, and myself, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. We hope you found this information informative and easy to understand. Be sure to check out Inmar's Thought Leadership page for other video webinars that may interest you. We're trying to host these on a regular cadence, at least monthly or every 2 months. We will be hosting a supply chain industry panel discussion on May 9th on the readiness for DSCSA. So we'll actually get industry experts that tell us where we are right now as far as with manufacturers, wholesale distributors. And if you have any questions that you did not submit afterwards, please email them to that solutions@inmar.com that you see on the screen here. And again, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Dwight.